Sukomi had always believed that the whole world was his playground and women were simply prizes waiting to be collected like free souvenirs at a wedding reception. And so he carried himself with that same reckless confidence that made people laugh and shake their heads. He was tall, dark, with a well-shaped beard, and he walked with the pride of somebody who knew he was the main character in every movie, even though his life wasn't half as organized as his noise suggested. He lived in a small apartment in Lagos, but if you heard the way he bragged outside, you would think he owned a duplex in Banana Island. Every evening after work at a small printing press where he was a machine operator, he would return to the compound, wear one of his fitted t-shirts that had suffered from too much washing, and spray himself with so much body spray that even mosquitoes would choke. He would then go out and sit in front of Mama Kudi's beer parlor, cross his legs like a senator, and start his evening sermon to whoever cared to listen. See, he would say, slapping his chest with pride, I don't fear HIV because now only small boys they panic for HIV. Me, I be baba for the girls. If woman pass here today, I go eat am clean mouth, nothing go happen. And the young boys in the area would burst into laughter. Some would clap and some would shake their heads because everyone knew Sukomi liked to exaggerate. Yet, they also knew he had something bold about himself, and that made his stories look believable. In fact, the nickname Baba for the Girls didn't come from him alone. It was a title the street boys gave him because no week passed without him changing girlfriends. He had once dated a nursing student, a single mother with 2 children, a church choir mistress, and even a married woman who used to sneak to his place during market days. If you asked him how he managed it, he would say with a wicked grin, na packaging my brother, women no like truth, them like confidence. If you show them that you are sure of yourself, they will follow you like goats follow yam peelings. The funniest part was that even when people tried to advise him, he would always twist it into another joke. His closest friend Babs once told him, Sukomi, you better calm down before you enter trouble. All this waka waka go land you somewhere you no expect. And Sukomi, instead of reflecting, just laughed until tears came out of his eyes, wiped his face with the back of his palm and replied, Trouble? Trouble they fear me now. Who I they fear? Trouble na small pikin for where I dey. My blood gets immunity past Coca-Cola. And the whole beer parlor roared with laughter again. But behind all this noise, Sukomi's life wasn't as smooth as he made it appear. He shared his room with a younger cousin who complained that Sukomi never allowed him to sleep well at night because every night a different girl was giggling like a puppy as he washed her head with fake promises, or she was banging on the door and quarreling with him for not picking her call. Sometimes in the middle of the night, the cousin would wake up to see Sukomi standing in front of the mirror, spraying perfume again and adjusting his boxer shorts like a man preparing for a battle. For real, Sukomi felt untouchable. He would tell anyone who asked that nothing could bring him down. You see me so, even if I sleep with the whole Lagos girls, na me go still dey stand. No sickness can enter me. I have a covenant of enjoyment with life. The more Sukomi collected women like trophies, the more his ego swelled like a drum at a Yoruba traditional wedding. He carried their names in his head like a football commentator listing players, and he would boast to his friends at the beer parlor, you see that babe where they do NYSC for that side? Done. That one where they sing soprano for choir. Finished. That one with 2 kids. conquered. I be Ronaldo for women matter. And the boys would shout Baba for the girls while clapping their hands like fans in a stadium. But behind the shouting, there was always tension because everyone feared for him and they kept wondering when this reckless game would catch up with him. Babs especially had a bad feeling. One night after they closed from work and were drinking at Mama Kudi's shop, Babs leaned close and advised, "My guy, you dey use your life play o. You think say na every sickness dey show face early, no be all of them dey ring bell before they enter person body o." But Sukomi only laughed, pushed him playfully on the shoulder and said, "Abeg, Babs, stop this your fear talk. I walk with grace. Wetin again everybody dey fear if no be HIV? And me, I sabi handle am now. Condoms dey, malaria tablets dey, my body strong." He slapped his chest as usual and the people around laughed. It even got to a point when Sukomi began targeting girls people warned him about. There was once a lady named Amara, a trader at the junction who everyone knew had serious mood swings. Some people said she was carrying something strange in her, but that only excited Sukomi more. He told his boys, "You people dey fear for nothing. Me, I go try am. I go chop this one clean and nothing go happen." True to his words, within a week, Amara was already sitting in his compound chewing groundnuts and shouting his name like a wife. The boys who saw her whispered among themselves, "This one na grenade. If it blows, all of us will feel it." Then there was one married woman named Ronke who lived 2 streets away. Her husband was a driver who often traveled and people said he had a very hot temper that could scatter a whole market square. Still, Sukomi went after her, boasting, "It is usually sweeter when danger is involved. Married women na special level." Babs shook his head until his neck ached. This boy no dey hear word. If thunder fire you, don't say I didn't advise you. Now, what made the whole matter even more dramatic was that Sukomi didn't just chase women for love or comfort. He chased them to prove a point, to feed his pride and to keep the title of Baba for the girls. Whenever anybody challenged him, he would rise to it as if it were a competition. One time, a group of boys mocked him saying, "Baba, we bet you cannot get that tall medical student that always form holy. Instead of walking away, Sukomi said, "Bet taken, give me 2 weeks." And just like magic, 2 weeks later, the same medical student was spotted at a bar with him, laughing like a small child. However, even with his nonchalant attitude, Sukomi couldn't deny the fact that his body sometimes gave him tiny signs of failure. He began to complain of constant tiredness, even though he covered it with jokes. And when his cousin once noticed that his eyes were looking a little yellow under the light bulb, Sukomi quickly blamed it on bad electricity. It got to the point when nobody said anything about his health again because they knew his arrogance would never let him accept that maybe his lifestyle was already writing his downfall in invisible ink. And then one Saturday evening, Mama Kudi, who rarely spoke in men's affairs, finally snapped. She stood in the middle of her beer parlor with her hands on her wide hips and shouted, "Sukomi, one day you go carry problem come here wey beer no go fit solve. You think say women body na meat pie wey dem dey buy anyhow? Continue o, Baba for the girls. But when sickness catch you, na the same mouth wey you dey use boast go dey beg for water." The whole place went silent for a moment, but Sukomi just raised his glass of beer, toasted the crowd and said, "Mama Kudi, make you no vex now. Na enjoyment dey keep man alive. Me, I dey covered." He carried on with this confidence until one Friday night at a party. Sukomi wore his favorite black shirt that day, the one with shiny fake designer logo, ironed so hard that the collar looked as if it was ready for war. He sprayed half a bottle of perfume until his cousin shouted from the corner, "Bros, na you and body odor dey fight, abi na human beings you dey go meet? If women smell you, dem go faint before you even toast them." But Sukomi only laughed. checked himself once more in the mirror and said, "Tonight, history will be made. Dem go hear say Baba for the girls enter the place." The party was at a fancy lounge on the island, organized by one big boy who had just returned from Dubai. There were cars parked everywhere, girls in glittery gowns, and the music inside was so loud that the walls themselves were vibrating. Sukomi and his boys squeezed inside, pretending like they belonged, and in less than 10 minutes, drinks started flowing. Not because they could buy, but because they had perfected the art of hailing rich boys until free bottles landed on their table. And that was where Sukomi saw a new girl named Fola. Fola wasn't like the regular girls who laughed too loudly or shouted into their phones. She carried herself like someone who already knew she was the main attraction, and the moment she walked past, the perfume she wore lingered in the air like temptation. Every man's eyes followed her, but most of them kept their distance because the rumors had already started. That is Fola, be very careful. They say she's a hot cake that burns fingers. Of course, those words were like firewood to Sukomi's pride. He leaned back on his chair, smiled at his boys and declared, "Na this one I go carry tonight. Make una watch your oga at the top." Babs nearly choked on his drink. This one, bros abeg, fear God. This one no be meat pie o. This one na crocodile meat. E go choke. But Sukomi's eyes were already locked on Fola like a hunter spotting bushmeat. He didn't waste time. He strolled over with his usual swagger, walking as if he owned the club. At first, Fola didn't even glance at him, which only made him more determined. He cracked a joke at the bar that made her smile. Then he offered her a drink, and to everyone's surprise, she accepted. Before long, they were talking like old friends. His boys at the table almost choked on their drinks. This boy they use juju. How he take do am? By midnight, the crowd had already noticed the new couple. Fola laughed at Sukomi's jokes, touched his arm lightly, and allowed him to escort her outside. The boys watched in disbelief as Sukomi walked past them with his chest puffed out, hand in hand with the hottest woman in the room. He winked at them, mouthing the words, "Baba for the girls," and the boys shook their heads. Some were jealous while some were impressed. That night, Sukomi felt like a king. He had achieved what other men only dreamed of, and as he lay beside Fola later, he thought to himself, "This life na cruise. Who fit stop me?" At first, nothing seemed wrong. In fact, after that night with Fola, Sukomi walked around the whole street like a man who had just won a world title. He made sure to remind everyone at Mama Kudi's beer parlor that he had conquered the unconquerable. He even told one of his small boys, "Write my name down for Guinness Book of Records, Baba for the girls, the only man wey fit carry Fola go house and still wake up alive." The boys held him until his head almost touched the ceiling, and he basked in the attention like a rooster surrounded by hens. But a month later, something strange began to happen. It started with tiredness. Sukomi, who used to bounce out of bed early and shout at his cousin for still sleeping, suddenly began struggling to wake up. He complained that his body felt heavy, but he still managed to laugh it off. "Na enjoyment hangover," he told his boys. "You no fit dey chop life the way I dey chop am and expect say body no go weak small small." They laughed at it, but that was not all. The itching came next. One afternoon at the printing press, he was scratching his arm so hard that his boss asked if he had bed bugs at home. Sukomi laughed loudly to cover it. "No be bed bug, na love bug. Woman, they miss me." Not long after, Sukomi began to notice that his urine had turned darker, almost like the color of Coca-Cola. He joked to Babs about it. "Guy, see as I dey piss coke, na sign say my body dey unique. But Babs didn't laugh. He frowned and said, my guy, stop this your nonsense. The body does not lie. Something is wrong somewhere. You need to go to the hospital. But Sukomi waved it off. He was too proud to admit that his so-called immunity might be failing him. However, the real shock came one morning when he looked in the mirror and noticed that his eyes had a faint yellowish tint. At first, he blamed it on bad bulb. He rubbed his face, blinked several times, and even poured water on his eyes. But the yellow shade remained. His cousin, who had been watching silently, finally said, bros, no vex o, but your eyes dey look like person wey dey prepare for masquerade festival. Sukomi shouted at him to shut up, but deep inside, he was starting to get afraid. Still, his pride refused to let him slow down. He continued visiting different girls, even though now they too were beginning to complain that he looked pale and tired. One girl even teased him, Baba for the girls don't turn Baba for the sick. He laughed loudly to cover his shame, but her words pained him. The suspense around him grew and his neighbors began to notice his body changing. Even Mama Kudi, who always observed everything, saw him one evening scratching his body furiously while ordering beer. She dropped her tray, folded her arms across her chest and said loudly, Sukomi, you don't look well o. Your skin dey lose color, your eyes dey change, and you dey sweat pass roasted yam. Now wetin you dey hide? Everyone at the beer parlor turned to look at him. For the first time, Sukomi didn't have a smart reply. He just forced a smile, gulped his drink and left in a hurry. But by the third month, the signs were impossible to ignore. His face grew thinner, his belly started swelling strangely, and his once smooth skin became patchy with rashes. Even the women who used to chase him began to avoid him. One by one, they stopped returning his calls until his phone that once vibrated like a busy market turned silent like a graveyard. Finally, one afternoon, after nearly collapsing at work, Babs forced him to the hospital. Sukomi kept resisting, saying, it is a small thing, na malaria dey worry me, I go drink agbo. But Babs held his arm firmly and said, if you don't follow me today, I swear I go call your mama. You think say this pride will last forever? Body no be iron. At the hospital, Sukomi sat on the edge of the bed, tapping his feet nervously as the nurse drew his blood. He still tried to crack small jokes, trying to act fearless. Nurse abeg, take small blood o, no collect everything. I still need am for night duty today. The nurse didn't laugh. She only gave him a long pitying look that made his chest tighten. The waiting time for the results felt like a whole year. He tried to distract himself by scrolling his phone, but his hands trembled too much to hold it steady. For the first time in his adult life, Sukomi felt real fear creeping into his heart. When the doctor finally walked in with the file in his hand, Babs held his breath. Sukomi forced a grin and said, Doc, abeg, just tell me say na malaria make me dey sleep like cow. I go buy mosquito nets for house. But the doctor didn't smile. He cleared his throat, looked straight into Sukomi's eyes and said, it is not malaria and it is not HIV either. Sukomi wanted to boast to Babs and say, I told you, when the doctor said the final words, you tested positive for hepatitis B. The words hung in the air like thunder that refused to strike. Sukomi blinked in confusion. Hepa what? He sat frozen on the hospital bed and his mouth opened as if it had just been slapped by an invisible hand. The word rolled around in his head but refused to settle. Hepatitis B. He had never even thought about it before. All his life, the only disease he heard people fear when it came to women was HIV. He swallowed hard and laughed nervously, trying to shake it off. Doc, abeg, stop that your grandma jare. Just give me chloroquine or paracetamol. I go dey alright. But the doctor didn't laugh. He pulled his chair closer, opened the file and spoke seriously. Listen, Sukomi, hepatitis B is not a joke. It is a viral infection that attacks the liver. It spreads easily through unprotected sex, blood, and sometimes even sharing sharp objects like razors or clippers. The difference between this and HIV is that hepatitis can destroy you silently without showing obvious signs at the beginning. By the time most people notice the yellow eyes, the itching, and the swelling belly, it means the virus had already been busy inside for months, sometimes even years. Sukomi's smile faded. He felt his palms grow wet. Wait, doc, you mean this thing is worse than HIV? The doctor looked him straight in the eyes. In many ways, yes. HIV can now be managed with drugs for a long, healthy life. But hepatitis B? If it damages your liver beyond a certain point, the only thing that can save you is a liver transplant, and that is very expensive. Even outside Nigeria, many people don't survive it. It can lead to liver cancer, cirrhosis, and slow, painful deaths. Do you understand? The words landed like heavy stones on his chest. Sukomi suddenly remembered all his reckless nights, the sneaking, the sweating, the women who laughed in his room, and the times he thought he was invisible. He gripped the edge of the bed and cried, "Jesu, liver transplant. Doc, abeg no talk am like that. I don't want to die young." Babs, who had been sitting silently, buried his face in his hands. He wanted to say, "I told you so," but the sight of his friend trembling made the words choke in his throat. The doctor continued, "We will need to run more tests to see the extent of the damage. Right now, your body is already showing symptoms: the dark urine, the yellow eyes, and the rashes. That means the virus is active. You must stop alcohol completely. You must be very careful with your lifestyle, and most importantly, you must face the truth. Your reckless behavior with multiple partners has put you here. If you want to live, you have to change." The final sentence pierced Sukomi like a spear. For the first time in his life, he couldn't talk back. He couldn't boast or make a joke. His nickname, Baba for the girls, suddenly felt like a curse echoing inside his skull. He lowered his head and muttered, "So, na me do myself like this." When they left the hospital, he walked slowly like an old man. The street that once hailed him now looked like it was mocking him. As he passed Mama Kudi's beer parlor, the familiar voices of his friends calling him Baba for the girls reached his ears. But instead of swelling with pride, his heart was filled with shame. He didn't even wave. He just kept walking. That night, he did not sleep. He lay awake replaying the doctor's words in his mind until they sounded like a funeral drum beat. He felt like a man carrying an invisible coffin on his head. Yet, his pride refused to bow completely. In his mind, he kept repeating, "Maybe the doctor dey exaggerate, maybe na small thing. My body will balance back. Na me be Baba for the girls. Sickness no fit disgrace me like this." So, instead of changing, he did what he knew best: lived in denial. The first rule the doctor gave him was to stop alcohol completely. But that same week, Sukomi returned to Mama Kudi's beer parlor and ordered a bottle of big stout. The entire place went silent for a moment, and people stared at him as if he had just signed his own death warrant. Babs grabbed the bottle from his hand. "Are you crazy? You won't kill yourself finish." But Sukomi snatched it back angrily and shouted, "Abeg, leave me alone. If I go die, make I die as a man wey chop life, not as a coward wey dey sip malt. Na beer carry me come this far. Na beer go escort me reach the end." He forced the drink down, but his body betrayed him. Barely 20 minutes later, he vomited all over the ground, shaking like a leaf in the wind. From that day, his downfall moved faster. His belly continued to swell like a drum, and his skin took on a strange dark shade with patches that made children stare and point. His body, which he once used to brag about, was now mocking him loudly in public. As for the women, well, they scattered like smoke. The girls who once fought each other to sit in his room now crossed the road when they saw him. His phone, which never stopped ringing before, became silent. Some of them blocked his number outright. One even hissed at him on the street, Abeg, carry your yellow eyes dey go, nobody wan follow you die. The same boys who used to envy him began gossiping behind him. Some said e be like say baba for the girls don collect curse from woman hand. Others shook their heads and said na hepatitis dey talk say catch am, he fit no survive sef. The shame was even now heavier than the sickness. The deepest betrayal, however, came from Fola, the crown jewel of his so-called conquest. After the diagnosis, he tried to reach her desperately. He called, texted, and even waited near her street one evening, but she avoided him completely. Finally, one day, she picked up his call and said sharply, Sukomi, abeg, no disturb me again. Wetin we do na enjoyment. I no promise you anything o. If your body don collect wahala, face it like a man now. Her words stung like pepper on open wound. With a trembling voice, he asked, so you knew you had the sickness before? There was a long silence. Then she sighed and said, Sukomi, everybody dey protect themselves in their own way. Now you no use your sense now. Now you dey always brag say nothing fit touch you. Now you don see. And with that, she cut the call. He sat there staring at his phone. Anger was boiling inside him, but helplessness was drowning it. He realized in that bitter moment that the woman he thought was his greatest victory had been the very snare that pulled him into the pit. He looked at himself in the mirror and he almost cried at what he saw. He could swear he heard a loud voice telling him, you are no longer Baba for the girls. You are now Baba for the grave. As time went on, Sukomi's life had become a shadow of what it used to be, and worse, he became an object of pity and mockery for the same people who once looked up to him. He stopped going out as often because every step he took drew gossip. But one Friday evening, against Bab's warning, he insisted on going back to Mama Kudi's beer parlor. Guy, abeg, stay for house. Your body no fit carry am, Babs pleaded. But Sukomi, who was still trying to hold on to shreds of his pride, replied, if I stay here dey look ceiling, na that one go kill me faster. I no fit allow people write my obituary while I still dey breathe. I go show face tonight. So he dressed up in his best shirt, even though it now hung loosely on his shrinking frame. His trousers, which was once tight, now looked baggy on his thin legs, and when he sprayed perfume, it clung to the sweat on his body. His cousin helped him button his shirt because his fingers trembled too much, and when he looked in the mirror, he saw a man he almost didn't recognize. Hollow cheeks, yellow eyes, and swollen belly. Still, he muttered to himself, nah nothing, Baba for the girls still dey. The beer parlor was lively that night with laughter, music, and bottles of drinks. But the moment Sukomi walked in, a hush fell over the place. All eyes turned to him. He tried to smile and to walk with his old swagger, but his legs wobbled slightly and sweat was already running down his forehead. Even though the night was cool, he forced himself to sit at a table, ordered a drink, and tried to act normal. But the truth was written all over his body. His swollen stomach stretched against his shirt. His eyes glowed yellow under the dim light, and his voice had lost its old loudness. Instead of hailing him, the boys avoided his table. Even the girls who once fought for his attention looked away quickly. See as fine boy don turn like yellow fever. This life no balance. Babs sat beside him restless and watching closely. He knew something bad was coming because Sukomi had not even agreed to treatment, but he didn't know when it would happen. Then, just as the night grew louder with music, Sukomi suddenly stood up, trying to show he was still strong. He attempted to dance and move his shoulders like before. People watched, half amused and half worried. But within minutes, his body betrayed him. His legs wobbled. His swollen stomach jerked and and did pokum pokum like a bag full of water, and before anyone could stop him, he collapsed heavily onto the ground. The music stopped and the entire beer parlor froze in silence, staring at Baba for the girls lying helplessly in the dust. Babs rushed to his side, lifted his head and shouted his name. Sukomi, Sukomi, wake up, Joe. But Sukomi's eyes rolled back weakly. The crowd stretched their necks to see with their own eyes how the once proud and mighty womanizer had met his downfall. Mama Kudi stepped forward, looked down at him and shook her head. Didn't I tell you? Did I not warn you here with my own mouth that one day beer no go fit solve your matter? Now see? Her voice sounded more like a verdict. With the help of two men, Babs carried him out quickly and loaded him into a taxi. The whispers followed them down the street. That night, as Babs sat beside his friend's hospital bed, watching him closely, he thought of all the nights Sukomi laughed at warnings. The same laughter was now replaced by groans. The same pride was now replaced by silence. And Babs shook his head and said to himself, this is not just a sickness. This is karma. The doctors came back the next morning and told Babs, his liver is failing. We will manage what we can, but he didn't finish the sentence and Babs didn't even ask him to. The silence said more than words. Well, the news of Sukomi's collapse spread faster than kerosene, and within 2 days, the whole street was filled with, have you heard? Baba for the girls is in the hospital. Mothers now used his name to warn their daughters. Even his family couldn't hide from the truth. His mother traveled down from Abeokuta the following week, filled with tears as she entered the ward. She saw her son lying there, frail and weak, and she wailed loudly, ah, Sukomi, my pride, my only son, see as enjoyment don't reduce you to skeleton. Nurses had to hush her, but the damage was already done. The entire world now knew exactly who he was and what had brought him there. Relatives who had once borrowed money from him or begged him for favors now stayed away. They too didn't want to be associated with him. At night, when the world was quiet and only the sound of machines filled the air, Sukomi sometimes groaned softly, holding his stomach. He no longer bragged as silence was now his companion. Outside, the gossip became juicier. Some claimed he had been cursed by a woman, while others swore it was his punishment for sleeping around. Well, nobody truly cared what the truth was. They only cared that the story was juicy enough to tell, and they told it everywhere, in beer parlors, in saloons, at markets, even in Sunday schools where mothers mentioned his name as a living example of wasted youth. After spending almost 2 months in the hospital, life moved on without Sukomi. The printing press replaced him with another worker, and his room in the compound was now occupied by a new tenant because his cousin couldn't keep paying rent alone. Even the beer parlor stopped mentioning his name, except when people wanted to warn others not to live carelessly. Sukomi didn't die immediately, and that was the cruel part. He lived on, but his life became like a slow poison, weak and painful. His swollen belly made walking difficult for him, and his nights were filled with restless groaning. He became a free cinema at the hospital, known by nurses and cleaners who shook their heads whenever they passed his bed. And just like that, my besties, the man who once called himself untouchable, the man who paraded the name Baba for the girls like a crown, became nothing more than a story people told on hot afternoons when the conversations needed spice. Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section. What lessons did you learn from the story? Kindly share the story out with your loved ones and give the story a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you've not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way. Bye.